We are very worried because, first of all, if you realize that this data was collected in 2019-2020, our pandemic began in February, March of 2020. This data is prior to the pandemic that hit us the last two years, right? So this data, yes, was analyzed and released later. And if using this data prior to the pandemic, you are saying that now poverty has dropped, I just don't see where it's coming, because we all know how much the pandemic has affected us, and I'll come to that later. So first, this data is old data. Second, now they are saying that coding, there was a discrepancy in coding. When Bureau of Stats released this report, they had said it had gone through due diligence with all the different partners, and World Bank was one of the partners. So what happened during due diligence? Why did the World Bank specialists not pick it up then? Is World Bank saying that they were inefficient during the due diligence period? And then it's been released and on our website for the last 8 months. So, and we need to understand, what do they mean when they say there was a discrepancy in coding? Because when they are talking about coding, they are talking about consumption aggregate has changed on non-food categories, utilities, electricity, gas, water, garbage collection, comms, postal, education. Aren't these areas where the government had already given subsidies? Electricity subsidy, education subsidy. Has that been taken into account? So if somebody has said, so for my school fees has been paid by somebody else and I have not spent on that, does it mean I'm not poor? My family income might not have been there. Somebody else has paid for it, so I cannot list it in my expense. It might have been the government subsidy. It might have been an NGO. It might have been my relatives sending me remittance to pay for my education or my child's education. So it will not show in my consumption data. It's not an expenditure I had. But that doesn't mean I'm not poor and you haven't assisted me, right? So we're trying to understand, and we need details. If you look at our HIS report, it was given in great detail. We cannot see these 4 paragraphs telling us that our poverty has dropped because there was a coding error. Also, we question when they're talking about household estimates. If I don't spend on food, that may mean that I simply don't have money to spend on food or utilities. So unless and until we understand where they're coming from and what is this all about, we cannot simply, our national government can't go around saying, oh, poverty has dropped because one party has said, without a signed document or without any details. Now, let me go to the pandemic. So we were saying, so original report was saying 29.9% of our people were in poverty, right? If we work it out at about 840,000 population, it came around 250,000 people, right? Now we know, we were told that the tourism sector employed 150,000 people. And all of that 150,000 people had lost their jobs during the pandemic. They were not the only ones. Schools, many businesses have closed down. Remember, judiciary was closed, a lot of lawyers, the younger lawyers, we still see graduate lawyers looking for jobs. A lot of people, so industry has collapsed so much that not only tourism sector, but other sector people were also affected. And if you remember, and it is a question probably you need to ask the government, is there was a survey done at that particular time. There was a survey done on everybody affected and the unemployment rates at that time, because there was going to be all this support and benefit. Where is that report? Because we would like to know which industry or who was affected. But we do know, at least from tourism sector, 150,000 people had lost their jobs. Out of that, if you see, the Reserve Bank has released that 25,000 people have been re-employed in some form. They are on superannuation, let's assume another 20,000 went into farming or into informal sector. I would say there's still about 100,000 people out there unemployed in the Western Division. Add that to that 250,000 that already existed. Western Division has been battered by floods. So people who are even doing farming have been badly affected. We are on the ground, and here, if you tell me that from 32.4%, revised rates are at 26.2% for Western Division, it's very hard for me to digest. My team is seeing, we have people who have not been able to afford mortgages, rent, people are living in shacks, in crowded homes, 10, 15 people. Yeah. We are still providing food packages. From January to March, we have provided more than 4,800 food packs in the Western Division. And when we have requests from Suva, we've had people unemployed in Suva, we've been referring to our partner here, and Fiji Women's Crisis Center has been doing that as well. We are providing medication. Yesterday in a workshop at Friend, because we do screening for blood pressure and diabetes, 50% of those who came to the workshop had elevated high blood pressure. We have people with strokes, with heart attacks who were employed before and can't feed their families. How do we digest this? Also, we are seeing a lot of single mothers or women. We know that 1/3 of the tourism sector were women in low-paying jobs. When they went out of job, they have not been able to get onto social welfare. There's nobody giving, there's no agency there where they can turn to for food, for assistance, and so on. So how can we say that poverty in Western Division has dropped? And we know in Central Division also, there has, poverty seems to be going up with the number of requests we are both seeing in the Central Division for food, for wheelchairs, for all sorts of assistance, education. And we all know that on a daily basis we see fundraisings being done for operations, for care that people can't afford medical here. They are constantly raising funds. So for us it's a bit hard to digest that we are saying their poverty has dropped. And we are gloating about that 100,000 people have dropped off poverty, instead of looking at what are the challenges and how do we fill in the gaps. Organizations like ours have been non-stop doing response work, and we are still doing response work on the ground. So we would like the government, and more than anything, the Bureau of Statistics to educate us. What I would really would appreciate is if Bureau of States or government or World Bank or whoever has the money to go and do a survey in the Western Division today. Go into survey in Nandi and Lautoka and then tell us that poverty has dropped. If anything, I don't think the country has ever seen the rise in poverty that we have seen, and we know it's because of pandemic. We need to acknowledge it, and we need to be making provisions for all these single moms, divorced women, elder women, youth, disability, people living with disability. We are continuously supplying diapers, mobility aid, medication, on an ongoing basis. We need to be thinking about how do we make the net stronger to support these guys instead of giving us some bogus figures like this.
And bloating.
Yeah.